Time, weather, and
AirWaves. 13 ZBM.
the various.
96 ZFB.
This is Radio VSB at 1450 at the top of the dial.
Good day and welcome to another edition of AirWaves, the program in Bermuda that takes a look at broadcasting over the last 70 years. I'm Al Seymour, CITV Program Manager. Today in studio we have a person who probably doesn't really need an introduction, but I will introduce him anyway. He's a senior broadcaster in Bermuda, Mr. David Lopes. David Lopes, thank you for joining us on AirWaves. Yeah, it's so great. This has been sort of a program that's been a long time in the making. And I understand that you began broadcasting the same year that I was born.
Wow.
Yeah, you can tell the audience that, but he began his broadcast career in 1962. So, going back in history, tell me, how did you even get involved or even interested in radio?
Well, I guess my last year in high school and my first year out of high school, we used to run a teen club up at St. Michael's Hall in Paget, in St. Michael's Church, and I played the music. And prior to that, of course, during your homework nights in the late 1950s, all the kids tuned into WYNS and listened to Murray the K, and that was the fledgling days of rock and roll.
That was at night, right?
Yeah.
We listened to it at night.
Oh, yeah, nighttime.
Okay.
And I guess it started from there. I knew Everest Acosta, and I knew, that he had just started at ZBM in the late 1950s, and it sounded like something that I would like to do. So, I graduate from high school from Mount St. Agnes and get in touch with the folks at ZBM and ask for an interview and an audition. And of course, my voice is too monotone. I said, no, you won't make it.
So how old were you?
I was 19.
19, okay.
19, yeah. So anyway, that probably would have been an early, or late in 1961, because I graduated in June of 61.
Okay.
So maybe 2 or 3 more times I, knocked on ZBM's door, and I guess maybe I made a nuisance of myself at this station because I used to go up and visit Everest, and I got to meet Quentin Etnis.
Right.
And at that time there was a staff of 60 people at ZBM. The only station that wasn't on at that time was FM 89, and that came on just before ZFB opened
in
up.
62.
In 62.
Right. So that's persistence.
So anyway, here I am working with the Bank of Butterfield, and I said, well, I'm going to try this one more time. So I think maybe Quentin Etnis must have got to Gordon Robinson and Pat Dunch and said, why don't you give the guy a chance, man? I don't know. I'm surmising that's what happened.
Probably.
So anyway, I did the audition, and they came and they said, look, we'll hire you as soon as you can start. I said, okay.
Wow.
And of course, that was the dream come
so
true, right?
you quit your job at the bank?
Well, yeah, I went to the bank the next day, and I went and saw Charlie Mann, who was my boss, and I said, Mr. Mann, I really want to get. And he said, I know what you really want to do. I said, yeah. I said, so I need to give you my notice as the 1st of May. Yeah. So he said, yeah, that's fine. So I waited, maybe a week or so, and I went back to Mr. Mann. I said, look, why you keep me here till the end of the month? Why don't you let me go on the 15th and get going on my new career? So he said, I don't have a problem with that. Okay, you finish up on the 15th.
Wow.
So on the 16th of May of 62, I joined ZBM staff. Also the same day, Trevor Critchley, who had been on staff before but had went into other things, real estate, and I think he had a nightclub above where the Little Venice is now.
Is Spencer Critchley?
The Gardenia Room.
Spencer's son,
either
or?
Spencer's father or Spencer's uncle.
Right, okay. I do remember him from VSP.
Yeah. Okay. So, and the day before that, Willie Smith, Wakey Smith, who was the top morning man in Bermuda, he left ZBM. So to go into other business. It seemed like everybody who I worked with outside of Quentin and Everest all went into other forms of work and all. Everest stayed on. Quentin, of course, went into politics, which I think was Bermuda's gain, but ZBM's loss. And so when I started, you didn't have a show with your name on it. You just slotted in wherever they needed you, right?
Right.
So when ZFB were about to come on, ZBM figured they needed an all-night show. So who got to do the all-night show? Was
And
me.
the graveyard.
Yeah,
show.
the graveyard shit. Anyhow, that was quite interesting because we used to get a lot of correspondence from people who would pick these stations up. And the all-night show was on ZBM 2, which is 1340, and that was graveyard. So for that frequency to be picked up clear in various places, overseas was really something else. And these people would write and say, you played this, and
The
this.
QCR. Question, do you actually remember the first time you sat in front of a mic live?
The first time.
The first show, like your first time you actually just spoken?
I had to fill in on ZBM 1 it was like a 5 to 7 o'clock slot.
Okay.
And Pat Dunch was program director, and he picked the music that you played.
Oh, yeah, the playlist.
Yeah. He picked the music that you played.
Okay.
And so you go to the library and pull these albums and play whatever he had programmed. And I did that for a while. And then, of course, when you go to the all-night show, it was my baby and I to program.
Were you nervous on it? I mean, I just
I don't know if I was nervous or excited.
Yeah, probably both.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. So one night during the all-night show, I was looking at the Billboard magazine, and I came across the country charts.
Right.
And I said, man, we have a lot of these songs and nobody's playing them.
Right.
So don't forget now, we had 5,000 guys at Kinley Air Force Base.
That's right.
And another bunch at NOB. These are all Americans. And they would tune into me at night, and I started playing these country songs.
Right.
And
Okay.
I wasn't even a country music fan at that point, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that is how I got into playing country music.
Yeah, because that must have
Once I didn't do the all-night show anymore, I was then doing still filling in where I could, but I did a Friday night show and a Saturday night show of rock, what we call rock and roll.
Right. So this is at Bermuda Road.
Yeah. ZBM started 1946 on Pittsbay Road, of course, where Boucher is now.
Yes.
And then they moved around to what we call Radio Center, which is the second building on Bermuda Road.
Oh, I didn't realize they had actually moved.
Yeah.
They were around
So
the
we
corner.
went to the third floor, but that was before my time. When I joined ZBM, they were already on Bermuda Road.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
So, of course, from there, Jim Richards was doing the morning show on ZBM 2.
This would have been 12. This was 1340 or 12?
1340.
For our viewers, that's the AM stations. We don't have AM anymore, but
FM was FM 89, and that was all reels.
Yeah.
It was automated
Tape
reels.
reels,
So
you remember that.
if you heard one reel, you already knew what was going to be playing, because it was just repetitious. But they did that just to get the FM station going.
But I asked an engineer one time, I said, why did they not have live announcers on FM? And he basically said, well, look, most people had AM radios back then in their cars and homes, and AM signal basically got everywhere. And he said it was kind of like an economics thing.
Yeah.
So it's, so I just find that kind of interesting. But yeah, so you were at Bermuda Road, and
So we're at Bermuda Road.
Yeah.
So Jim Richards got sick, and Trevor Critchley was like program manager or whatever, along with Pat Dunch. So who does his shift when he's sick, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was there for, was to fill in where I was needed.
Right.
So I did the morning show while Jim was ill, and then when he came back, he wanted a break from the mornings. He wanted to do something else, and I think he did.
Getting up at
So he did an afternoon show. And Trevor Critchley came to me. He said, "You like doing that show, don't you?" I said, "Hey, it fits in with my lifestyle. I'm a farmer. I get up to milk cows in the morning anyway, and I was doing that before I went to work for ZBM. So that fits in with what I do." So he said, "Well, as of such and such a date, I think it was the 25th of February of '63, I took over the morning show on ZBM 2, 1340, and
So what did you
Been there ever since.
did you dub yourself the
Did I?
milkman? The milkman? You call yours? How did you get
yeah,
that?
I dubbed myself the Milkman because the program that started the day was called the Milkman
Serenade. I do remember. I actually remember the Milkman Serenade.
Yeah, was the Milkman. In those days, all the programs had names, and that was the Milkman Serenade.
Right, right,
So and then after 7 o'clock, it was called the Morning Merry-Go-Round.
right.
So we
Yeah.
played country music for the first hour, and then popular music for the next three, because I worked from 6 to 10. Yeah.
So, quick question: when you were at Bermudiana Road, did
Yeah.
you ever do any TV at all, or just radio?
I did. What I did on TV was the Piggly Wiggly TV bingo.
Now you see, that I didn't realize how long that went because I was 16 when you were doing it at ZBM. The little cards, the little blue
That's
cards,
right.
blue and white cards.
You go to Piggly Wiggly,
Yeah,
which is a marketplace
yeah,
now, and
yeah.
you get your for every $10 of groceries you spent, you got a card.
Yeah, I still
And then-
remember. I remember the theme song was called Popcorn, Hot
Yeah,
Butter.
Popcorn,
Oh, you
that's
remember
right.
that?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, with the balls
So anyway,
flying up and down.
so
yeah.
I did that for, oh God, for the duration of the show.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
played a bingo game every day, and then at the end of the week there was a grand prize.
Yes.
And it was all sponsored by Piggly Wiggly. And that's where I got the legs 11 thing from. Number 11 was my skinny legs, right?
Was it? What was he? Long hair,
Bright-eyed, curly-haired, skinny legs and all.
Yeah,
the legs
yeah.
are still skinny. The hair is gone. I'm trying to, keep it going with the ponytail. But times change.
I heard you one day talk about you doing some remote broadcasting back in
Yes.
the either 50s or 60s. You guys had like a remote truck or something you used to go and do. I mean, that's how you described it.
Yeah. I did. I used to do a show at Knick Knack. When Knick Knack was where the Emporium is on Front Street now.
Yes.
Every Saturday morning, I would do that at 9 o'clock, 9 to 10. And then 10 to 10:30 was a break, and I'd go up to the arcade restaurant, Joe Greasy's we called it. You get
Arcade.
Arcade.
Yes.
And get a cup of coffee and a scone, and then I'd head up to Masters, and then I would do Masters morning matinee from 10:30 to 11:30 with Raymond Spencer and Bill Edmonds and the people that were there. Matty Carrigan.
Yes.
They were all the Masters people. And Masters was in the city where.
Yeah. I remember us when they first had color TVs. We all sat down and stared around.
What about when TV first came up, and many people didn't have TVs, but the people that sold TVs had the TV in the window, so you'd drive into town and stand outside and watch TV. You couldn't hear what was going on, but at least you could see the picture.
Yeah, as a youngster, I remember going into town.
So then I did those shows, and then I had a very good rapport with the Young family that owned Bermuda Drug.
Was it pharmaceutical? Was it?
The Youngs, Red Young and his brother, his
Right,
father.
right.
So they did a show at the Annex called the Annex Good Time Hour on Saturday mornings between 11. This was after the Masters. Days,
Right.
between 11 and 12. And it was called the Phoenix Good Time Hour. Now, in those days, you could fly to New York for $99. People used to go on Pan American to New York for lunch and then come back. Remember?
I do
Remember that?
I do remember hearing.
Okay,
I never
so
did it. But
every Saturday morning, they gave away a round-trip ticket to New York, but you had to be there to get it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Neville Dias was the manager.
Neville Diaz, yes.
Neville was the manager.
Yes, I remember him. He was the manager of Toys R Us. He founded
of
Toys R Us.
That's right.
Yeah, he gave me.
And
He actually
one
gave
day
me
I
some
said
work.
to him, I said, Neville, you got an awful lot of people here. Aren't you afraid that maybe somebody, maybe pilfering? He said, don't worry. The people that you think that you're watching are the ones that are watching you. So he said, no, we don't have that much of a problem. It was fine. So that was extremely popular. That place was packed every Saturday. And a lot of people got a free trip to New York.
Well, I'll tell you what, David, we're just going to take a quick break
Sure.
now.
Okay.
And we will be right back with AirWaves. Very interesting conversation with senior broadcaster David Lopes. We'll be right back.
The following is a message from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. What is probably the first written conservation legislation in the Western Hemisphere was the 1620 Act protecting sea turtles passed by the Bermuda Assembly, only 11 years after Bermuda's colonization. Today, Bermuda has comprehensive conservation laws that protect various species of flora and fauna, both endemic and introduced. All migrant and resident birds in Bermuda are protected under the Protection of the Birds Act 1975, except for domestic birds and those which are considered pest species: crows, sparrows, kiskadees, starlings, feral pigeons, and feral chickens. The cahau, or Bermuda petrel, the common term, the white-eyed vireo, otherwise known as the chick of the village, and the white-tailed tropic bird, otherwise known as the longtail. For more information on protected species in Bermuda, visit the Department of Environment and Natural Resources at environment.bm. You can also find us on Facebook or call 236-4201.
Welcome back to Airwaves, the show on broadcasting in Bermuda. If you've just joined us, we are speaking with senior broadcaster David Lopes, and we've been having a very interesting conversation. You're talking about radio in the early portions. I just was thinking during the break, you remember the big LPs, the vinyl that we used?
Yep.
Now, I even saw some 16-inch discs. People actually played. What were they for?
When I started at ZBM, ZBM1 had two of those huge turntables.
The Gates turntable?
I think
McGurdy, one of them.
They were Gates, yeah.
They were Gates, okay.
And you know what those were used for? Yeah. The soap operas. Second Spring.
Housewives' Choice?
Housewives' Choice.
That was
right. The Housewives' Choice show used to come on every morning.
Portia Faces Life.
Portia Faces Life. And what about Second Spring? Can a woman who was once loved completely ever find true love again?
Yes.
You know?
Because I remember that show. I think Shirley Dew or Nell Bassett.
Shirley Dew did do, but I'm going even back, even
before
that. Shirley Dew took over, yeah. And usually there was a guy who would do Housewives' Choice. I gave you a picture of Roy B. Ladd.
Yes.
Roy was the host of it for a while.
Yeah.
And Emily Morse used to come on every week on a show that was sponsored by Belco and promoting electric stoves, and she would give a recipe every week of something to cook on these.
It's funny you say that because my dad did the Happy Home show,
yes,
which was a housewives show on ZFB.
Yeah.
And that must have been an interesting time because as opposed to one supermarket in the neighborhood, now you had two.
Yeah.
So that must have gotten things. I can only imagine the competition that it spurred.
And what you need to realize also is the fact that these supermarkets are something relatively new, because every parish had a A1 store and a Loblin store, O.R. Loblin, and people would go in and get their groceries. When you walked in, there were two pervasive smells. One was kerosene, because people cooked with kerosene in those days, and the other one was codfish that was in a wooden box under the counter.
Yeah, I remember you telling me the story. But Bill, how did you mix farming with broadcasting? I mean, it just doesn't seem like the two go together, but I mean, you've made it work.
Most of my farming was in the dairy industry.
Right.
When I had Spittle Pond Dairy, and I milked with my milk cows for over 60 years, and you do that first thing in the morning, and then in the 12 hours apart. So it was 4 a.m., 4 p.m. Spittle Pond, when I was doing Spittle Pond, if the guy that was working for me was away, I was doing 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. Hey, all of this broadcasting and farming to me is not a job; it's a passion. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
And I try to tell young people when you try to pick a job, a profession, pick something that you're going to enjoy doing. There's nothing worse than having to go to a job every day that you don't enjoy doing.
And I guess it could be difficult because sometimes you do things. I mean, I've been fortunate like you. I've been in broadcasting, and I've been in broadcasting since I was 3. I remember I tell people I remember the smells of the station because the equipment was all tubes.
Absolutely.
And it gave off ozone.
Absolutely.
And that ozone had a certain smell to it, had a certain feel. It wasn't harmful, but it was really good. That's how I felt about my career. So
Now, I was, if you don't mind, I was very fortunate to come into ZBM as a greenhorn. I knew absolutely nothing about broadcasting except what I used to watch these guys do.
Yeah.
And when I had people around me who were, I think Wilf Davidson was probably the best broadcaster that ever came to Bermuda. Up to that point, there always were locals involved in broadcasting in Bermuda. One of the early announcers was Brendan Hollis. You remember Brendan Hollis, who did all the documentaries?
I don't remember hearing him, but he just passed this past year. Yeah.
That's right. He was an announcer, and then he quit radio and went into real estate. And a lot of people. So we had a lot of locals. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, you're one of the 3 people I know that are still actually on the air from the 1960s. It's yourself, Kelly Zool, and Shirley Deal. I don't think anybody else is on the air right now. I think you folks carry the senior banner.
I think you're probably right.
And I find the whole thing fascinating to me because you know, with all the new technology today, people don't listen to the radio as much, but then they do.
Okay,
they do, and they don't.
So I had people like Everest DeCoste. I think Everest was looking over his shoulder a little bit. I think he was afraid that I was going to move him or whatever. Which we had our issues, but we were good friends too.
Yeah,
he
went Munson Agnes, but he went Munson Agnes as well, didn't he?
He graduated from Munson Agnes, I believe, in '59, and then he had a job at the Playhouse showing movies. The Playhouse Theater, which is
because I want to talk about Everest because obviously he's passing.
Okay, we can talk about him.
I'll tell you what. Next segment we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about him. But between Everest, Quinton, and Wolf Davidson, we used to do television tape runs every day. Everything that went on television was recorded that afternoon, and I did 2 days a week. And somebody else did 2 days. Anyhow, I just remember doing television tape runs with Wolf Davidson. The guy never made a mistake. I mean, right? So he sat on one end of the table, I sat on the other, just like we're sitting here now. Yeah. He would read one commercial, I would read the next one. He would read the intro and extra, and I would do whatever. And the guy never made a mistake, so you don't want to make a mistake either.
Oh, yeah, pressure.
Right? So he, like I said, I think he was probably one of the best broadcasters that ever came to
I
Bermuda.
do remember him because I was about...
And he did TV
I was
news.
about 14 when he finished up, but I do remember the night report.
Yeah.
With Wolf Davidson, and then it was 7 days, the weekend program.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
and then when he left the station, he'd go down to town every night, go to the Chinese restaurant that used to be where the mall is now, Washington Mall, upstairs on the second. New Queen.
Was it Queen or the New Queen?
New Queen.
Oh, the New Queen.
He used to go there and get his dinner every night.
Yeah.
Anyway, Everest DeCosta definitely knew his stuff. Let me tell you, he was one of probably the best. We put out some pretty good guys locally, Yeah. Quinton did that smooth.
Yeah, I know when we started broadcasting in Bermuda, particularly ZBM, was more Canadian announcers or maybe British announcers. From what I read, from what I was reading in the history, that they weren't too like putting local announcers. I don't know. It seemed like they didn't have as many local announcers.
But those Canadian guys helped us.
Oh, they were. It's almost
they helped us. There was Lloyd Halleck, Jerry Clements,
right.
Tom Lewis, and an American guy who I had quite an impact on me and followed me during the 10 to 2 show was Dennis Owens.
I've heard of him.
And Dennis passed away just last year, I think.
Wow.
And he was working just in recent years in a classical radio station in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I think it was Washington D.C. No, early 1990s, 1991, I was given the Queen's Certificate
Right.
Badge of Honor.
Okay.
And Dennis did his show for a week from the Hamilton Princess and invited me on. And I went down. That was the last time I saw him, actually.
Speaking of that, did you ever do any like broadcasts from overseas for Bermuda Broadcasting? Was that being, were you like a live remote or a phone interview? Or
I didn't
anything
do
like
any broadcasting from overseas, but I can tell you what I did do for my own show in the mid-1960s. I'd take a tape recorder, which was about that big, and weighed a ton.
Yeah.
And I went to New York to watch the Braves play the Mets.
Ah.
And I befriended, is that the right name?
Yeah, yeah,
became
befriended.
friends with the guy who was in charge of the New York Mets media, whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, he came here for his honeymoon, and I met him.
Yeah.
And John Geis was his name. And he said, anytime, I said, I know the Braves are your team, but when they come to play my team, if you want to go down on the field, you just let me know, and I'm going to bring you, I'll give you the slip. So anyhow, he arranged it, and I took this tape recorder, and I spoke to Hank Aaron, Eddie Matthews.
Aaron, wow.
And the best baseball story I have is Joe Torre. Joe Torre became manager of the Yankees, and he was playing for the Braves at the time, and I went down, and he came up out of the dugout, and I said, good evening to him and all, and he spoke to me, and I said, could we do an interview? So he says, yeah. I said, you don't remember me, do you? He said, I know you're from one of the islands, but I can't remember which one. I said, I'll be right back. So he goes down in the dugout and comes back up, and here's these guys, these reporters with cameras around their necks, Joe! And he said, wait a minute, my friend from Bermuda here first, and then I'll talk to you guys. And I'll never forget that,
That's amazing. The one of the sad things about broadcasting Bermuda, and I say sad in a way because a lot of the tape, film, videotapes and 60 millimeter and audio tapes, most of it is gone. The stations.
Do you know how many vinyl records were taken to the dump?
I remember as a teenager, a dumpster going to the dump with all the 16 millimeter film from the news. I was young, and I could, you don't really realize what it. I find history is very interesting. When you're in it, it's difficult to see the value sometimes, but it's like, even here at CITV, we basically have kept
This
everything.
is why I try to tell, I try to ask people, look, if one of your loved ones have passed away and you're cleaning their premises or whatever, don't throw stuff away. Call me, I'll come and get it.
Yeah.
Books, pictures, newspapers, I don't care how old they are. And man, when I pass away, I guess I'm going to need truckloads to take this stuff. Well, I don't know where they're going to take it, but anyway.
Do you have any, they call them air checks. We used to sometimes recordings of yourself. You have any recordings of yourself, say?
I have a few tapes, but what do you play them on now?
Well, you got quarter-inch tapes? You mean like the reel-to-reel?
Yeah, the quarter-inch reels.
But you have them, right?
Well,
we can figure that out.
I have a couple, and the cassettes. You remember the cassettes we used to
Cassettes
use?
are actually coming back. I was up on Amazon the other day, and they're selling cassette players. But what they have, they also, you can put the cassette player in, then you can convert it to an MP3 file so you can play it on your computer. Yeah, but the actual physical cassettes and vinyl's coming back as well.
Well, Billboard has a vinyl listing, and I was in Music Box the other day, and the girls do have vinyl there. Some of it's secondhand.
Yeah.
And I said, older people? She said, no, younger people are coming in and buying this stuff because they want to know what music was listened to.
Not only that, but
a
a vinyl record, if it's kept, if you bought a vinyl record in the 1950s, never opened it, right? Yeah. You open it today, it'll play and sound just as good as the recording equipment was of that day. Tell you what, we're going to take one more break.
Okay.
And I'm having a great conversation with David Lopes. We'll be right back. Importing animals into Bermuda. All animals arriving in Bermuda must be accompanied by the following: a copy of the import permit issued in advance by the Bermuda Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, the original health certificate issued within the 10 days prior to the animal's arrival, which includes the identity, contact information, and signature of the issuing veterinarian, a properly endorsed CITES document for an animal of an endangered species. Animals arriving without the proper documentation are immediately returned to the point of origin. Visit your veterinarian to obtain a health certificate and veterinary statements within 10 days of your animal's arrival. If the animal is coming from the United Kingdom, visit the local veterinary inspector within 5 days of your departure for an export permit. The application forms can be found on gov.bm. If you're applying for an import permit for dogs and cats, forward the application form and veterinary documents to this office via email at animals@gov.bm or fax it at 441-232-0046. Please ensure that your email address or fax number is shown on the application form. We will usually respond within 1 business day. Import permits will be valid for 10 days marked from the date of the veterinary certificate. For more information, visit the Ministry of Environmental and Natural Resources at gov.bm.
CITV Channel 2.
Welcome back to AirWaves, where we're having a very interesting discussion with veteran broadcaster David Lopes. And again, I'm glad you come by. It's very important to tell these stories, and there's so many people that I have not had a chance to talk to. People have passed on. There are some great broadcasting people that I never got a chance to talk to. So
but I'm
here.
available, Anybody wants to talk to me, I'm available.
Yeah. So you were saying during the break about how today's technology has probably changed radio forever, so to speak.
I have a real problem with technology. I think medical technology has done wonders for people's health and all, but I think sometimes the other technology is kind of ruining a lot of what was very important to me. And I'll give you an example. Let's just move from broadcasting. Let's go to sports.
Right, yes.
When we used to have Martin Muir Cup at BAA Field or Devonshire Rec in September, there's been no football since March. 4,000 people would come out to watch the Somerset Trojans at Hotels International. Right? Sundays, you would have people standing in the rain watching football. Cricket, I think maybe to a lesser extent, except the big games. So we now have TV, cable TV. You can sit in your living room. You can watch NFL. You can watch baseball. You can watch basketball. You can watch cricket in Australia. You can watch anything anywhere in the world. You don't have to put up with some of the unruliness that's going on, not only in Bermuda, everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's sad. It's sad. People unfortunately don't go out. Look what's happened to the nightclubs. You can watch everything on TV. People don't go out for entertainment anymore.
And that's probably a global issue, around the world, where everything is in your hand. Everything is upon your hand. Because I still remember the games. I mean, I worked at VSB. We did a lot. This is in the 90s. We were still filming games and stuff like that. Let me ask you this.
And do them live.
I got to ask you this because I remember as a teenager listening to you doing a horse race one Boxing Day. Is that something that, and I remember you, I'll try to peek your memory. No, but I remember you talking about a horse named Mistletoe. And the horse was named Mistletoe, and I don't know if it was at Shelley Bay, if it was somewhere else, or was it
Mistletoe was a horse at Shelley Bay.
Yeah, but I do remember hearing you on the radio. There was maybe broadcast. So you were involved in horse racing. Were you involved? Obviously.
I had a horse. His name was Dean Bumpus. People still call me Dean Bumpus today. I was very, very friendly and very much a part of the Lyons family, and Mr. Deeb said, and Deeb, he was involved in harness racing.
What's his name again?
Mr. Deeb Sad.
Is that the gentleman that had the store?
That's right.
Well, I've heard people say they call him Deb
now
Sad.
We're getting into something else, right? But Deeb Sad used to ride around on a bicycle selling stuff out of his basket, and then he opened a place on Reed Street, and it became Lyons Brothers.
Yes.
And Lodge Brothers were big sponsors of mine. And there were other businesses in town through John White and Advertising Associates, who
Actually
sponsored
worked
my
for him.
program.
I worked at his advertising agency
Yeah,
as a summer student.
yeah. So anyway, let's get back to technology and radio.
Yeah.
I never thought I would see the day when I wouldn't have a disc to play. And we went from the vinyl disc to the other discs, you know, the little tiny compact discs, which they were supposed to be, but they still stacked up and they, need a lot of room.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and today everything is on a computer.
Yeah.
And I find.
So you've seen the evolution.
I like to touch things, man.
Yeah,
I find it very
yeah.
difficult I did find it very difficult to transition into that. Yeah. And there are some things that I can put technology into good use and do things that I couldn't do before. Yeah. But I still try to keep that personal touch. I want people on the other side of the radio to say, "The guy's talking to me."
But I think. And you know how you really don't miss something until it's gone. Yeah. And if you go back, you don't have to go back that far, but like when maybe 10, 15 years when VSB was on the air, ZBM, and you had live announcers right through the whole day. Yeah. The whole day. Remember the whole VSB and ZEP? So you can always, and then you had the newscasts, which were, at 12 o'clock, VSBs was 12:15, but you could listen, it was a very personal thing. You didn't have the distractions. And I think that's what we've lost. And I don't know how we'll get it back, but
my wife tells me all the time, David, we're living in different times. We're living in different times. And we are. We're living in different times. But you know what? That doesn't mean that a radio personality, and there's a difference between a DJ and a broadcaster, okay? Yeah. And I'm a broadcaster, and I want people to feel like I'm touching them personally. Yep. There are people that get up in the morning, turn their radio on for me, and Kelly Zool, they never met us, but we're their best friends. Yeah. Yeah. And Kelly comes on after me. Between Kelly Zool and I, is what, 120, 130 years of broadcasting,
I'm trying to get him when they should Gospel Train.
Sure. Kelly should come and see you, man.
Yeah, because, it was Gospel Train.
Yeah. So anyway, so you use the technology to enhance what you do, but I still try to keep the old radio person to person intact as well.
So is there anybody you know of, or anybody that's even interested in, like, say, for example, that you could mentor, that, because you're probably going to be on the air for another 50 years, but after that, do you have anybody, like, coming up behind you, or anybody even interested?
That's an interesting question. I don't know of anybody who would want to do what I do, and I'm beginning to wonder whether or not the generations of people who are slightly younger than me are going to want that kind of thing on radio. Yeah. Is there going to be a market for it? Yeah. Like right now.
I guess that's the real. That's the real answer.
Another guy that I have to mention is Jim Woolridge. Jim Woolridge, he did get behind a microphone and did his cricket, the voice of summer, but the man was a super salesman.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling him he could walk from the birdcage to the long tails and sell.
That's right. He would walk along Front Street, and and every other person he'd meet would be somebody from the stores and whatever. And the guy was just he was a super salesman. And this is one thing that unfortunately I think business people, and I know budgets are tight. But man, give me a chance and let me tell people about your product.
Just a couple of names before we even begin to wrap up. Like, I remember Joe Carvalho. Yeah. How was you work with Joe Carvalho?
I worked with Joe. Joe, he called himself the Hawk.
The Hawk.
And he did afternoon drive on 1340. I did the morning. Everest did the night. And then when Kenny opened up VSB, Joe was one of his first announcers.
I didn't realize that. He worked Joe Carvalho.
Yeah, he worked at VSB.
There's just hundreds. There are like hundreds of people that have passed through these the booths, as we say, the microphones. And, people. Like, I saw George Smith the other day. He was.
George used to do morning gospel.
There's so many people, and then like people who have gone on overseas to do their
we had a lot of people. Elroy Smith.
Elroy RC.
Elroy RC.
Sturgis Griffin.
Yeah. And then we had Nell Bassett, who was the first woman of color on Bermuda Broadcasting on radio in Bermuda. And she went to New York. She's got a book out. I don't know if you
Yeah,
see it.
it's a rotten
and
business
it's
or
interesting,
something.
very interesting stuff.
Yes,
and she became a part of WNEW, was an all FM, was an all
WNEW
women.
radio.
And Quentin was not too happy when she left, and yet that was Quentin's radio station, WNEW, William B. Williams.
Metro Media Incorporated. Yes.
William B. Williams was the top guy on WNEW, and Quentin used to listen to him when he wasn't on himself, and he tried to, we try to pick up pointers from different people that we admire. I guess I had to hold my own road because I can't remember anybody that
I will say again that I heard you say that basically you've never worked a day in your life. And I find that interesting. As a farmer and a broadcaster, to be able to say that, and I feel that in some ways myself a bit. I've really enjoyed my career in the media, and as you say, it comes down to really
it's passion.
Enjoying, passion.
It's a passion. Yeah.
And I tell people, young people, I don't care what you can find as passion, whether it's in your garden, whether it's sewing, knitting, or flying, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You've got to find that kind of passion. And I just want to, is there any parting words or anything, anybody's name you want to mention or anything that you want to?
I'm afraid with the names that I've mentioned, I've left somebody out.
Oh, I think we've left a lot of people out.
It's been, if I last that long, May 16th of this year, of 2023, will be 61 years that I've been doing this. And it's like a blip. Where's the time going?
It's that, no matter how long you live, it's just not long enough. It's too short.
I tell people that all the time. You can live to be 100 years. It's a short span.
Right. Another thing, real quick, I remember you saying one time you had your children on your Christmas morning.
Right.
You had them in the studio.
Yeah.
That must have been.
I had my kids on, and then I had my grandchildren on after that.
Right. On Christmas morning.
Yeah.
I remember as a little kid listening.
Hey, look, we worked every day. The only time
you
you got a day off was if it was on your day off.
Yes.
But we worked every day. We worked through hurricanes.
Right.
And isn't that our job? We're supplying a service to people.
Yes.
And people want to know, what the weather situation is with hurricanes and whatever.
Yeah. It just makes you wonder, I think, what's the next 20 years going to look like. One of the things I want to do with this program is just get people to tell their stories, because long after we've shuffled away, these things will, and we'll post these to YouTube and stuff. They will be up for future generations to.
We talked about technology, and I think one of the reasons why, not ZBM, but all radio stations are going onto this modern technology is to do away with the human person.
Yeah.
And everything will be automated.
Yeah.
You can replace a person, but you can't replace a
personality. No, I don't think you can myself.
And I'm just. I don't even know how to express it, how grateful I am that I have been accepted by this whole island. Don't make any difference where I go.
Yeah.
People know who I am, and if they don't know me, all I have to do is say a couple of words, and right away they know who I am. And I'll tell you a little story as we wrap up. I drive a horse a lot.
Yeah.
And I was driving down by Johnson's Bay, which I do quite often with my granddaughter, and she is probably 18 or 19 then, and we were driving, and of course everybody calls out to you, right?
Yeah.
So she said to me, vovô, which is grandfather in Portuguese, she said, I can imagine what your funeral is going to be like.
National Stadium. Well, I am very glad that you came. And George Smith said to me just before I closed that he said he was at the Botanical Gardens filming one day with the little Bolex, and he said, my goodness, I was picked to be here in this portion of history. He just found it so amazing. And then it's the same here, and it's obviously the same with you. We find ourselves in our positions, and we make the most of them. And I think that's the real message that is.
I was told a few times I'd never make it in broadcasting.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's probably a Lopes trait. Tell me I can't do it.
They told Michael Jordan he couldn't play basketball.
Yeah.
He wouldn't play basketball either.
Yeah.
But David Lopes has been a real pleasure. And I certainly appreciate you coming on this program.
Thank you.
And if there's
And
anything
don't
you
forget,
want
I
to
used to
add
work with your dad. So.
Oh yes, many moons ago.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, this year, 62 would have been 60 years. So it was 60 all around.
Yeah.
So thank you very much again.
Hey,
and
thank
maybe
you for
we'll have
having
you.
me.
We may have you back. Who knows? Well, thank you, Mr. Lopes, for joining us here on AirWaves, the program that brings you history of Bermuda's broadcasting over the last 70 years. I'm CITV Program Manager Al Seymour. Thanks for joining us.